Control, this is Agent Dev. I'm in position.
Copy that, Dev. Stand by for go.
Standing by.
Hi, everybody. You are joining us for another episode of Agents of Dev. Welcome. Glad to have you here. Hey, hello there from the great white north of 2026 storm.
The blizzard of 26, or Trevor, I guess, is what we're calling it. Yeah, glad to be here, actually, and be able to be here. It is, New England, we know how to do snow, Mitch, but sometimes we forget. And I think yesterday was one of those days in which you look out and you think, I think that they made a film about this where people got snowed in New York City and couldn't escape.
Oh, yeah. Escape from New York. Oh, no, that's a different one.
But it was very similar to that, but with snow.
Snake.
So it's like Escape from New York with snow.
With snow. That's a different movie altogether. But yeah, you guys are definitely prepared for some cold weather. The wind is always what gets me. It swings around the buildings. Oh, man. Whew,
yeah,
that can
we
be
had
better.
like 60-mile-an-hour winds with the snow. And so lots of, swirling and looked pretty, sand dunes in form factor. But yeah, glad that today is sunny and it's a whole new day.
Oh, good. Glad that wind is like a pesky memory leak that you just can't find. It just drives you crazy. Anyway, so introduce our first segment here, Brad.
Yeah, so this, we actually, if you guys recall, those of you who perhaps have been with us before, and thank you if you do recall, we introduced a new segment called the Call Out, 2 words, and what that's meant to do, or sorry, 1 word to call out in text, to talk about some of the vendor moves that we've found interesting in this last few days. And as you know, we don't publish the day we record, so this is live now. What I'm going to talk about for my call out, and that is, do you remember Pure Storage, the lovely orange and the hexagon shape, and they are now called Ever Pure. Very huge name. I remember Informatica changing its logo to the origami bird and everyone flipping out about that. If you recall, 5 or 6 years ago, this is
I missed that one, but okay.
It was a big deal, Mitch.
Okay.
It was a different orange color shade. So anyway, they've really changed their branding to reflect what we're seeing in the market right now, which is the death of dumb storage, the demise of storage that doesn't function as an intelligence layer, and that is what Everpure and its colleagues in the storage marketplace, so Dell, HP, et cetera, are all striving for, is to elevate the role of data beyond just sticking it in file blocks and objects and then managing that with backups and such. It's becoming a very different play for them, and one that brings those vendors into kind of direct competition with what I would call the traditionalists, the cloud first traditionalists of Snowflake, Databricks, and then all the hyperscalers. So interesting times are right with us now.
So you're saying, said another way, a data makeover is what we're doing. Like, how do we get our data in place and better prepared? Well, it's for AI, for other things too.
Well, it's really for AI.
Okay. Yes.
Let's just face facts that right now, every investment is centered around how do I bring AI to data or data to AI, and what does that mean for traditional data storage and analytics practices? So it's top of mind, as top as it can get.
Great. Well, my call out is, and I also have a report published about this. Report's titled IBM versus Anthropic, a tale of the COBOL modernization tape. So there's a big controversy, right? When Anthropic announced in a blog post of, "Oh yeah, we can solve this COBOL modernization problem. No problem. Cloud's all ready
My
to go."
goodness.
So
Did you think about AWS in that mix? Because I saw that they were trying to do the same thing, and when I saw those, I thought, why are we going from one legacy language to another?
yeah,
That was my
let's move
initial
it to
thought.
Java, and then we'll move it to what should we
Is
put
it
in there?
just like stepping stones? Is it just to get used to getting more modern? Why not just jump to Rust? Is the question.
Yeah, that's it, exactly, or just kind of don't care. So here, so you can tell I've been around for a while, and COBOL was actually second language that I learned. I started in Apple Basic on an Apple IIe.
Mm.
And a lot from that point forward, there's always been, oh, we should replace this. We like this database vendor better because we're going to standardize on it. Or we want to rewrite this in a different language, or we just want to rewrite it to, kind of bring it up to date. The road is littered with failed modernization projects. Promise you, if you haven't been around long enough to live through that. Now, if you're starting greenfield and you want to refactor code, okay, that's a different problem than you've got a whole enterprise, especially in the mainframe world where you're running ATM, how many millions of ATM transactions through your code. They're kind of the iron workhorse, most of those applications that are in COBOL. Yes, some of them are been around and maybe get run once in a while. But so, my report is all about sort of wrong question of what tool do we use? The right question is, how do you put together the best team, the best boxing coach, the best gym workout coach, the best nutritionist? How do you get the right things together to be successful at this? So when you do the modernization, and by the way, I think AI will be more helpful, if not equal, probably more helpful in the architecture, in the data transformation, in the planning and execution of this performance testing. Hey, you're just rewriting code doesn't mean you're going to handle millions of ATM transactions, right? How do you scale and do all those things? I think that's where AI will actually have again and again and again impacts on how we modernize projects or platforms or applications.
Yeah, and I think what Gen AI can also do is help us to prioritize what we modernize, because not every line of COBOL code needs to be rewritten.
Oh,
And
I'm offended. I thought it was all really good, but okay,
no,
I'll
I'm
roll with it.
saying some COBOL code should never be touched. That it is sacrosanct. That we shouldn't mess with it for a couple of reasons. Well, one might be that we don't ever use it, which might be a good reason. And just knowing that is an important part of modernization, because typically you can't rook up with AI and say, just make everything Java. Let's go. You got to know.
It's not a syntax change. We're not changing, formats.
No, right. Yeah. So you got to know what the code is doing, and understanding code is something that generative AI is pretty good at.
Yeah, it's a lot of the institutional knowledge that we lose in people retiring, passing away, et cetera, that wrote programs in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, all through to today. Some of that knowledge is institutionalized, and other people know it, or it's in documentation, but a lot of it is just in code and in people's heads. So, do we get rid of this code? We don't know what it does. The people that wrote it aren't here. We'll analyze it and try to determine to our best understanding functionally what it does, but why is it here is the harder question. So
snarky comments don't count.
They don't count. So I ended the piece with, by the way, it may not be IBM versus Claude or Anthropic. It might be IBM plus Anthropic is the best answer. So keep that in mind, as the markets crash around IBM stock or do whatever crazy things the stupid market does on the tiniest little bit of a blog post. It's insane.
And think about the tech
that we'll react to. So that's my call out. Hey, you wanted to talk about VAST forward. So let's dive into that. Talk to me about what's going on.
That have happened by the time this goes live. And they do their annual show, Fast Forward, and this one's in Salt Lake City. And I was actually geared up to go, but then we had a snowstorm and tested gravity out and found that gravity always wins, so no travel. But that story aside, Vast is an interesting player, and I'm mentioning them partly because we talked about Everpure previously, and both vendors obviously competitors with one another, and one does it from hardware up, and another does it from software down, if you will, and both of them, focusing on how do you get data to meet AI where AI lives, and to do so in a performant manner. And it was interesting to see Vast and its competitors talking about just vectorize everything, just embed everything, and we'll do it at scale. This was maybe 8-10 months ago. Okay. And that has changed a little bit, partly because the reality of the market is that you should not vectorize everything. It's just, not tenable. There are use cases where you need to be able to, push down indexing, for instance, into the storage tier to gain performance when you have a lot of indexing updates that need to happen as quickly as possible. So yeah, that makes sense. But you just don't push everything into a vector. It's just a data type that serves a purpose, and that purpose sits alongside other formats and other representations of data. So I like what I'm seeing from these vendors, which is a maturation, I think, of their understanding of what enterprises really want them to do. And if you look at what Vast came out with at their conference, there are two things that really stuck out for me. One was this policy engine, and another was the tuning engine. And these both play into what they have rebranded themselves as. They rebranded themselves as this a few months back, the AI operating system. And get used to it, folks, because that is what you were going to be hearing from a lot of vendors.
Yeah, agree.
So not just an enhanced storage product, but an AI operating system. So to do that, they have recognized that what's important is two things. Observability and governance, and the second is context and meaning, and domain expertise. And you can't get all of that from frontier scale models that you're running API calls against. You can do a lot with them, but there are many situations, not just thinking about data sovereignty and other sort of requirements around control and ownership, but also around simply optimizing your spend for AI. And if you are sending every single request to Gemini 3 Pro preview, why are you doing that?
Get ready for the bill, but yes.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So tuning engine is something that we have seen starting to, it's making a comeback. It was a big deal a little over 2 years ago when we first started recognizing that you didn't have to have frontier scale models. Everything doesn't have to be a billion parameters and above. You can have 70 billion and below, and have it be very good at select tasks. And what that means is, if I'm doing something like named entity extraction for building, let's say, a semantic layer for my enterprise, do I really need a frontier scale model to do that? No, I need something that has been trained on my corporate data, on my knowledge base itself, and that's too expensive to do for $1 million plus. So why not fine tune smaller models? There are lots of technologies. There are companies, and one of my favorites is Unsloth. If you've ever heard of those guys?
I have not. No, this is your space.
Fantastic.
So there's some definite companies I haven't heard. Yeah,
slothy. Yeah,
slow moving but very cute, as I remember.
They are very cute. And these guys have been helping folks use techniques like LoRa and DPO to fine tune and align models for some time now. And we're starting to see the big guns, meaning the hyperscalers and the vendors like Vast, jumping on this wagon of, well, maybe we need to include in our intelligence, our AI operating system platform, the ability to fine tune models in a way that gets around some of the data science-y stuff. Because apparently in the enterprise, we really don't want to do data science anymore. Although you and I could spend an entire podcast talking about why that is a horrible mistake to think that way.
Aspirational.
It's very aspirational.
Hey, let me ask
But,
you a question. So I remember a day when the big focus was on the wire speed of what type of connection technology was from the disk to the CPU, the computer, and the wire speed. SCSI 2, that's too slow. We're moving to the next thing. Now it's NAS, et cetera, and tiered storage with solid state versus recall slower speed from spinning drives, et cetera. It seems to me that, and I do remember too, query optimization, where you went to the DBA's office. Well, it actually was the cubicle with the highest walls, the biggest moats that you had to cross to go talk to the DBA.
That's because they had to put all the green and white on the walls. All the printouts for their schemas had to fit on the wall.
He had tomes, books that he would go through and diagrams on the wall with formulas that nobody else understood. I'm making fun, but it was pretty close to reality.
It was true.
We have query optimizers and everything that have gone along the way to make parts of that. My whole point being, you're talking about optimizing and analyzing the model access. Really, a full system is about all the parts, right? If you're going to go back to the ATM example, if you're going to run millions, billions of ATM transactions through an application, process claims, whatever it is that your app does, it's all those things. And it usually is one or two that are really have the biggest factor, but sometimes it's the combination of what you're using and why and how to tune those. My point being, that seems like a really complex problem that you used to go back to those cubicles to solve. Now you can use AI to help you understand it at least and make rational or better decisions. Maybe it can start to do some of the optimization. You agree?
Yeah. Yeah, it's been like, forever and a day that we've had query plan optimization baked into databases. And that's why you would invest in a database management system, not just a database, but a DBMS, because they do things like that. Because it is very easy to just crash your system because you've got the marketing folks running a long running query, and then finance comes in with a quarterly close at the same time, and who wins there? Somebody's got to win. But it is interesting that it is a multifaceted, multi-tiered problem that is in a way collapsing a bit. I'm going to say under the weight of AI right now, wherein those DBAs, don't just have to spend all of their time, working through schema mappings and trying to figure out why pipeline A is not working anymore. We're starting to see this, as you and I have chatted about before, this rise of the AI shepherd, in which those folks don't have to worry so much about the syntax, and instead they are worrying about the intent of the code. And what we're talking about is you're concerned more with the outcome than you are with the routes to get to that outcome, and that's good and bad. There are some many bad things that can rear its ugly head if you sort of bleed into the whole ethos of vibe coding institutionally, let's say, for some of those. But anything that you can get from a vendor like Vast, for example, that collapses one complicated aspect of that complex chain, I think is definitely worthwhile. And if that's using traditional narrow AI to do just basic regression, let's say, great, why not? If it's actually using that same formula to get your algorithm to get you to do more narrow AI, even better.
Let me ask you.
I'm game.
I'm going to hear. So, if is there anything interesting about the policy engine that they announced? What's that about? What are they doing that's kind of unique and interesting? Where do you think that's going?
Yeah, yeah. It used to be the realm of specialist companies,
Hmm.
and actually, as a part of the rebrand from Pure Storage to Everpure, they announced an acquisition of a company that specializes in doing stuff like that. And so there's this recognition of the very problem you were just describing, Mitch, about how this is a cohesive whole. It is a holistic view must be taken if you're going to build an agentic system that's successful, and that incorporates being able to have policies that put the onus not on the downstream execution of the code, but instead on the upstream provisioning and instantiation of the assets that feed the code. And so here we're talking about data. So we've had this notion for the last few years about shift left in trying to,
Hmm.
for instance, build data products that have an SLA. For here's what we guarantee you're going to get in terms of time to the data, and then also policies around things like PII protection and other means of security. And so having this sort of enforceable policy, or something we like to call contracts, a data contract that is attached not to the execution, but instead to the instantiation and provisioning, is fantastic, because it means, when you as a developer are building out a solution, you're not having to trace back why did this not work? Why am I seeing everyone's social security numbers in here?
Hmm.
Or am I seeing everyone's social security numbers? I don't even know.
Hmm. We're moving to an era. Um, I wrote this observability native idea, and I'm kind of thinking about we're moving to an era where instead of 2D policy, it's 3D. It's not
Mm.
shift left. It's think horizontal, right? It's a sort of like Star
Shift
Trek
up and
Wrath
left.
of Khan, where Khan thinks in 2 dimensions, but Captain Kirk thinks in three, so he outsmarts him.
Yes,
Gets behind
yes.
him and fires. Right? Great movie, one of my favorites.
Very
Uh,
2D thinking. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, which is embedded throughout the process. I think that's what you're saying, is it's before it's in production, as it's in the data streams, or the loading, or the transformation, or that's where the policy matters too, right? And it's got to
Yep.
be
Agreed.
enforced. You don't want to find out in ops that, oh, hey, we weren't supposed to be showing social security numbers. Kind of wrong place to figure that out. You want to know that at the
Right.
point where the problem occurred, or preventing it from occurring.
Agreed. And that's brings us back actually to like the idea of the tuning engine is if you can, and you can look for this happening in a lot of places, like Red Hat was very early to try to do this, and AWS with their Nova Forge is doing this, and this being helping developers build solutions without having to actually use live data to do that.
Hmm.
Instead, you can use synthetic data and have that match the data that you actually have in the database. And that's not just for testing, it's also for building out that domain expertise into the model itself. So if I'm fine tuning a model, I might have good data that's not enough to train that model, but if I can use synthetic data generation to expand that corpus that I can then use to fine tune the model, I'm going to save myself a ton of money. I'm going to avoid any kind of security issues, that might come up from training, fine tuning my social security numbers into said model. Um,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
it's as you say, it's like tools that are applied at different places in that 3 dimensional chess, and so we're back to Star Trek. Um, view of a solution. You can't just think one dimensional checkerboard. You have to think in 3 dimensions.
Hmm. Fascinating. Great when an analogy works really well.
Star Trek works for all analogies. It's
Yes,
perfect.
everything I learned, I learned in kindergarten and in Star Trek. So, you know, the combined book.
Indeed.
Anyway,
Indeed.
it's interesting. So I really want to get to the last segment. So why don't we move on to the drop? Well, it's interesting because it seems like the tick of the 2026 clock moving over to the new year, suddenly everybody started behaving a little bit differently. They started moving in more directions, different directions. And one of them is you look at the partnerships that are being
Mm,
formed between companies, the announcements that are
mm,
made. Um, and it isn't necessarily, there are big ones, but there are also kind of subtle, small ones. This is observability vendor being part of, security or an operations SRE agent. Announcements that are targeted around, like we're talking about modernization. Um, but I'm interested. Everybody's kind of partnering with everybody, but they're not. They're also developing special, deeper relationships, and some of those will pan out, and some of them won't. So whenever I see news, Brad, I'm guessing you probably think of these things. Well, there's news, and then there isn't news, and then there's why is it? Why is it? And why would Pure Storage acquire that company? Right?
yeah,
Why? What does
yeah.
that do for them? How does it fulfill their mission? So I think this is the era of the call out really is look for strategies unfolding, right? We kind of see the pieces being put in place in 2025. I think we'll start to see the mosaic of the picture this year. And
Do you really?
part of that is, well, I'm
That's very
optimistic.
optimistic of you.
Yeah. I'm not saying it's done by the end of 2026. You might be
Okay.
saying, well, it could be a horse or it could be an F1 car, but I'm not sure. It's something like that. Maybe at
Something in
that
between,
level of
more
granularity.
likely.
So watch
Yeah.
for the partnerships, I guess is my message. So how about yourself, Brad?
Yeah, I love that because it is so true, and that, with Everpure picking up OneTouch.io, bringing in this tagging security vendor, you're like, "Why the heck would they do that?"
Mhm. Mhm.
Uh, there's a good reason, and that is part of what I really enjoy about the jobs that you and I have, is being
Absolutely.
able to try to read between those lines and think about where the vendors come from and where they're going, based upon those partnerships. So for me, I've got a technical drop for us today.
Okay. All
So
right.
brace yourselves, everyone. My drop is to please watch out for a forthcoming record from and I don't know why we're back at Star Trek, but we are. William Shatner is announced a spoken word heavy metal album. He had worked with one of the many ex Megadeth guitarists, Chris Poland, recently, and he got such a kick out of it, he decided to make a full album with, I guess he's saying like over 30 some odd players, artists coming in. So for those of you who, like me, enjoyed Christopher Lee's, gosh, what was it? Charlemagne
Mhm.
record that he did with his sonorous voice. It won't be the same tone and tenor of voice, but his cadence alone makes listening to Shatner worthwhile in any venue.
He made an album in the 60s, as I remember.
Yes.
I'm trying to think of the name of it. It was something like The Transformed or The Changed Man, something like that. But it was all spoken. It was just exactly what you're talking. Maybe he's done more than that, but I
He's got a
remember.
couple. Yeah.
And it's just, it was really, I kind of heard a little excerpt of it one time on some trivia show or whatever about Star Trek or about William Shatner. And it's interesting. He seems to be at this phase of his life. I mean, good for him of, I think I'm going to go up on a rocket, go to space for, 120 seconds or however long you last up there. I think I'll do another album with heavy metal this time. It'd probably be with Bad Bunny will be the next one. We'll see. We'll see how it works
That would
out.
be interesting. Yes.
That would be. But it was really odd to listen to. I'm curious what this one will be, if it will be just kind of bizarre. It's sort of like
It will
poetry in
be a
motion.
unique artifact in the ocean of experience that I am fully behind.
I'm sure that's what we've been missing in this vast thing we call the internet.
Yeah, yeah, it's so we kind of it's interesting how quickly we as a species, become inured in our current, worldview, and we forget just what we used to take for granted just a decade or two ago. And if you
Mhm.
think about how the internet functions, how it works, why you go there, it is not at all the same as it was in the GeoCities, AOL, days, is it? And
Mhm.
I'm not saying, it's nostalgia that makes me look forward to things like Shatner's, new album, but it is in a way. But I think, we need to hang on to and not forget some of the things that were the smaller pleasures and benefits in life of having technology and the wonder that comes with exploring that technology. And I feel like sometimes the modern internet kind of takes us away from that. And I want to experience it the way I did when I whizzed up my 9600 baud modem, back in the day, and discovered some undiscovered territory, if you will, for yet another Star Trek reference,
I
if you're
remember
counting on
when
there.
the baud speed changed that you couldn't read it scroll across down the screen anymore. I mean, that was an
Yes,
experience.
disappointed. Yeah, that was far too efficient. Yeah.
It's interesting. We're kind of expanding this a little bit, but so many times we think, oh, this is it. This is the thing that's going to happen. And that's what sort of sticks, right? It's
Mm,
whatever your first web browser was like, okay, hey, Mosaic or Netscape Navigator or whatever you used, right? Or your first computer, your first game console. That's kind of the thing that built it on, but you built your expertise in. Um, I had this unique, I guess, honor of Alan Shimmo, who's a friend and business partner of mine. He runs TechStrong, DevOps.com, et cetera. And he and I were talking, and he took one sentence that I said and wrote a whole blog post. So I have a quote, of which is the blog post is about my quote being a quote, and it
what
was
was the quote?
something like, "The world will create a better open cloud 1,000 times." In other words, this generation of OpenClaw isn't really what's important. It's what's going to be spawned from it, and how it's one of those moments that really carries forward in the multiplication of what it really becomes. And someday, not saying it won't be around, probably will still be around.
No, the
Um,
ideas are what we're really building
yeah,
and building on.
exactly. And that's kind of to your point of, you know, so often I think back to references from points in your career or time in your life. And you're like, yeah, I remember doing that. Oh, I wish we had something like that. And it inspires you to do something. Or it's a frame of reference to start to solve a new problem, a new way. But those things, they last with us. And it's great. Whether it's Star Trek Wrath of Khan or it's the latest episode of the Night of the Seven Kingdoms, good kind of
Right.
stuff.
Right. That is what defines our culture and humanity. And humanity isn't sitting still. It needs to honor the past, but it's always using that past to inform the path forward. And that's what's
Mhm.
so great about being alive and having the opportunity to be alive right now and to experience these technologies and to have my .env files exposed on Moltbook. Not that
Not
that
that that
happened.
happened. You forgot to put that in the get ignore. Oops.
Oh, no, it wouldn't matter. It didn't matter. It was they vibe coded implementation of, Firebase, I think it was, the
Uh-huh,
database, and
uh-huh.
and, uh, we're storing all of the keys there and just left it open.
Hey, why not? Why not? Yeah, just put them
Why
back in the
not?
code. Let's just kinda go what's old is new again. Let's just do it that way. Anyway, well, as always, this is a great fun to do this together, Brad. Thanks for partnering doing our Agents of Dev podcast. If you're enjoying this, please, like, share, comment, send us a message. You can always email us at agentsofdev@futurumgroup.com. Matter of fact, that website / Brad-Shimmin and Mitch-Ashley is where a lot of our work is published, as you can get and follow us on LinkedIn and all the good places. So we thank you for being part of our conversation and hope you're enjoying it. And we look forward to coming back again next week with another episode of Agents of Dev.
Control, this is Agent Dev. I'm in position.
Copy that, Dev. Stand by for go.
Standing by.